All right, guys. The second topic comes from Patreon from our boy Brandon Ferguson. To begin, I'm 16 years old and grew up with the generation of Xbox 360 and PS3 games.
Yeah.
Wow. But recently, I've been purchasing old consoles and games to play so I can experience the older retro games. So my question is, what are some old NES, SNES, N64, PS1, etc. games that I need to purchase and experience? Thanks.
I mean, this is a tough one to answer because
All.
yeah, I mean, like you really could distill it down to like a few games on each console that you really need to play. But again, I feel like in the NES era, and even if you go back to 2600, which is another console I think that's totally worth playing, if you want to understand like the genetics of games, then I think that's actually an essential 2600 is an essential console to play.
Well, so that's a big question because I've been going back and forth on Twitter with some people about games that are pre-NES. Are there any that are necessary to play?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of
like
free
what?
NES games. If you want to understand where adventure games come from, there's a million different games to play. If you want to understand where RPGs and Western RPGs came from, a game like Ultima is probably worth playing.
But not so much if you want to understand where they came from, but more like these are classics that need to be played. Like these are just great video games.
Sure.
Like, not a history lesson, like just great video games.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite Atari game is River Raid. I think that's a fucking classic game and super fun and super easy to understand, but it's like it's a fantastic game. Yeah, I mean, Space Invaders, Miss Pac-Man, Defender. These are all pre-Atari games that, or contemporary to Atari pre-NES rather, that are totally awesome games to play still. I mean, like Miss Pac-Man is a fucking masterpiece. That game is awesome game, especially if you play it in an arcade, like in an arcade cabinet or a cocktail cabinet. I think something like Space Invaders was so popular in Japan that there was a shortage of 100 yen coins when the game was out. I mean, that's an incredible thing, and that's not so much a zeitgeist thing as much as like that's just a good formula for a game. Space Invaders is a solid game. I would even say something like Arkanoid, brick breaking games, Breakout, are awesome, and you find where a game like we were talking about recently, Peggle, like it traces its genes back to those kinds of games. So I think. Are they essential to play? Actually, yes. I think that they probably are.
Okay, those are good options.
Yeah.
The Twitter conversation started with the Rare Replay that we.
I mean, none of those
and they're
games.
Like, you're like Tim. You're just hating. You're setting a bad example for people, for younger gamers, and saying that all old games are bad. I'm like, I've never said all old games are bad. In fact, I love old games. He's like, yeah, but nothing pre-NES. And I'm like, I'm not saying that. Yeah, Pac-Man and all that stuff. Duh, those are like classic games that are fun. The gameplay is there. But a lot of the other stuff we're playing, they simply weren't good.
No, you don't need. I mean, there's a lot of text adventures that you can play back then. I like again. It depends on if you want to have like go back and like really enjoy yourself, which is what you want to do with video games. But there's a part of it that I feel like if you really want to understand games, you got to go back and not so much enjoy yourself, but just learn the story.
Yeah.
And the beauty of games that I think is still, we talked about it. Nick and I talked about it not too long ago. Was when you compare games to film, games right now are in like the 1940s, right? Like. They're really coming into their own. This is when we got Citizen Kane and stuff like that.
Right.
And which a lot of people think something like The Last of Us might be something like a really seminal work of storytelling as opposed to like what came before, like the silent pictures and stuff like that, which is maybe what something like from the SNES era is. Yeah, exactly. The beauty is that we're still not far enough removed from the beginning. And I'm not talking about like Tennis for Two, 1959. I'm not talking about mainframe role-playing games at universities. I'm talking about like Pong and everything after that. So like early 70s after that. We're not far enough removed from that where it's not impossible to go back and learn, because in 50 years it's going to be very hard to go back and figure it out. And especially because a lot of these games just won't be playable.
Yeah.
And so I encourage younger gamers, and I do it often. A lot of people email me or we talk on Twitter or Facebook, whatever. I'm like, you got to go back and play these games. It's important. You really can't understand where games are now unless you go back and play those games. And I think it's important. Now, if you want to his question, if you want to just enjoy yourself and you want to start with the NES, which is a great place to start, it's still my favorite console of all time by far. I think it would be important for me to understand what genre he's into, but I think you can easily say the Mario trilogy on there, both Zelda games, Castlevania, Mega Man, I would even jump into things like Dragon Warrior, Faxanadu, Crystalis, Star Tropics, Kid Icarus, Metroid. I mean, there's a lot of games on NES that are worth playing. And then SNES, it's a similar thing, but it's when we get to the SNES era that I think we really need to understand where he's coming from, because it starts to get so broad that are you into role-playing games? Do you like side scrollers or platformers?
Would you say that it'd be like from the NES on, it's like a triangle going down?
Sure. Yeah. It's exactly where I would say, because while I like going to Atari and even fucking around with games like in interim games like Pitfall or something like that, is there was a time when we couldn't imagine playing a game like Mario. Mario wasn't the first platformer, but it was the first platformer that we understood and really, as gamers, really grasped onto.
Yeah.
But going back to a time where no one even could make a game like that or make a game like that run, it's pretty extraordinary. And if you put yourself in 1982 mode, and you're like, all right, I'm playing Miss Pac-Man, and I'm playing a shitty Pac-Man port on Atari 2600. This is what the best they could do, you know? And then you just go 3 years ahead and you have Mario Brothers. And you're like, Jesus Christ! Like, put yourself in that place and be like, 3 years ago I was playing this, and now I'm playing this. And then you go 6 years ahead of that, and you're like, now I'm playing Mario World.
Yeah.
And then 3 years from that, you're playing Super Metroid. And then 3 years from there, you're playing Castlevania Symphony of the Night. You know, it's like the timeline is so essential.
Yeah.
I don't think you can really appreciate going back unless you are willing to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's my take. I don't know if you guys agree, but I think it takes work. It's not all fun.
I mean, definitely. I mean, that's completely accurate. But so going from it, you got the NES and the SNES, and then there's the jump to the 3D consoles. So then in that era, I feel like there's much less games that you have to play because they're more similar to contemporary games.
That's true, and I also would say that I think this is when genre becomes really important. Your preferences become more important as time goes on because, yeah, PS1, N64 to a degree, but not nearly the degree of PS1, had such a vast library of game. A lot of the games sucked. There were, I mean, I'm not saying PS1 was a great console, but there's a lot of garbage on that console. But this is where it's like, do you like 3D platformers? Mm-hmm. Do you like role-playing games? Because this is a seminal role-playing game.
Let's take all
console.
of that stuff out of it. Like, what are just the games that people need to play? Because even on NES, it's like giving them Zelda. Like, if they don't like that type of game, they're not going to like it.
Sure,
you know?
I agree with what you're saying, but I do feel like on N64, like it would be easy to go like, all right, play Mario 64. But if you're not into 3D platformers, then who the fuck cares? You know, like there's other games on that console.
But I mean, you could say that about any of them, even if it's NES though, right, or SNES. Like,
sure, but there was my point is that there was just such a limited way to play games. There was side-scrolling games, and then top-down games, and then role-playing games, and some rudimentary sports games. But there wasn't. I'm just saying the more and more, because I would, you know, on PS1 for instance, I'd be like, well, you should probably play Final Fantasy VII, and you should certainly play Castlevania Symphony of the Night. But if you don't have sensibilities towards role-playing games, these might not speak to you. So that's.
But I mean, that's the thing. Like, give it a try.
Yeah,
right?
Final Fantasy
These are the games that you should give it a try.
Like that, yeah.
So Nick, what do you said that the NES is your favorite console
Easily, yeah.
because of the library. What about you?
Oh, that's tough. That's tough. I mean, I did a lot of PC gaming. That's the problem. So, I mean, I'm talking early PC gaming too, which was like back in the freaking Disney. I would say probably NES. That's the NES is the one I remember the most because that was the one I shared with my brother. So we got like 2 times the amount of games that we were allowed to have.
Yeah.
By the time I got to the SNES, I think my brother he was done with it. I don't think he was gaming anymore. But there's a ton that we've already done a ton of Let's Plays too on just classic NES games. Most notably, I think did we just do Ninja Gaiden?
Yeah, Ninja
yeah.
Gaiden.
So that's another one. That's one of those games you have to play. You gotta play. What the
Shit, the original Metal Gear is a game that I feel like you must play.
Contra,
you gotta play Contra.
There's a ton. I mean, there's a lot of, and there. I mean, I can name. God, I love games like Kickle Cubicle and Arkeistas Ring. I mean, there's like really random shit on that console that these games are fun and they're quaint. There was no excuses back then. You know, you couldn't be like, look at these pretty, this pretty story. Paperboy's a jam,
must
man.
play.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like we should work our way up through the consoles just very quickly.
Yeah.
Just name like 3 games for each console. So we've already done NES. What about SNES?
I don't know if you can limit to 3, but just like without
just
a
a
number,
handful
but just
of
the
games.
ones like okay, Super Nintendo. So for my answer for best console for library, it'd be Super Nintendo, PS2.
Okay,
like for sure.
Well, definitely for library.
If I had to
think
choose
anyone
one,
would.
Super Nintendo. But Super Nintendo obviously got Mario World, Final Fantasy VI, which would be 3 in America.
A Link to the Past.
Link to the Past, Super Metroid.
Fucking ActRaiser is on that console. I mean, and these are. It's tough, man. There's a lot. I mean, Super Nintendo's a tough one because there's a lot of games. But I was so role-playing centric. I mean, if you like games, role-playing games, you want to play
Chrono Trigger
or Lufia, or like, I mean, there's Final Fantasy IV is another one that you'll want to play. If you can import games, I mean, that's when things get really crazy. You can start playing, I think, like Front Mission and Dragon Quest V, and I you know, there's like SNES is interesting because that was such a diverse and versatile system.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even like the original Star Fox,
Donkey Kong Country 2 is awesome.
Yeah, I even say like again, and I don't want to go back to it, but again, if you're not trying to just straight up have fun, but like absorb yourself in the tech and figure out where people were, like a game like Pilot Wings, I think is an essential game. Like I remember when I first played Pilot Wings, I thought this was like I was like I can't believe this game. This game, Pilot Wings sucks. I just want to straight up say Pilot Wings
bad.
sucks.
It really,
but
yeah, I mean, that
but
was
like
really
it was
is.
so. Incredible,
polygons, man.
Yeah, I was like, I remember being like 8 years old, being like, "This is incredible! I can't believe this game exists."
Yeah, I feel like you can't talk about early console gaming without talking about the failures too, or the games that you got where you're like, I'm so excited about this, and because you didn't know, and they were just bad or so incredibly hard that you were like, am I the only person on this planet that is having this much difficulty with this, or are there other people, right? So it's almost worth throwing a couple games in there where you're like, you're not gonna like this, but like play Ninja Turtles, right? Try to get past this level with the freaking underwater bombs, and just understand that this is what we used to be up against in this fight for video game glory. And then go back and play a different game that's actually better and more fun and a little bit easier as far as the degree of difficulty is concerned. Because if I remember correctly, TMNT was like, it was like a cone.
It had spikes. It didn't make any fucking
hard.
sense.
But then moving forward, I mean, N64, that's easy. There's like 3 I can easily name. You gotta play Mario. You gotta play GoldenEye. You gotta play
Zelda.
Yeah, you probably gotta play Zelda.
Probably.
I didn't like Zelda. I couldn't get past the controls. That
You're
was my
insane.
other thing. That's
Ocarina
when I
of
stopped
Time
playing Zelda.
That is required. So there's that, Mario 64, GoldenEye, and Mario Kart 64.
Yeah, you got to play Mario Kart. Mario Kart's still jam. We played that at Screw Attack, and I was like, dude, it comes right back to you.
Yeah.
Even though we were playing with controllers that were completely broke ass.
And there's others. I mean, I would say Majora's Mask is a must play on Zelda or on N64. I know people think it's crazy. I loved both Castlevania games on the 64. I think those games were chronically underrated considering the time they came from. I don't understand quite why people hated them so much. They were hard. I think even random like Hybrid Heaven. There's like random ass games on N64 that were kind of weird.
I love your answers are so bizarre. Hybrid Heaven.
Because I'm saying like there's obvious directions to go in, but I don't always know that that's the right direction to go in. If you and Mario 64, you know how I feel about Mario 64. I think it's super overrated, and it's almost to a point where it's like,
How is it overrated?
It's because he's crazy and he thinks Sunshine's better, but you know.
But what I'm saying is like Mario 64 is an essential game to play if you want to understand where we were playing at the time. But if you want to play a great 3D Mario game and you have time to play one, you play Galaxy. Or something like that.
Yeah, but
so
even then, like still, he was around for Galaxy, so we'll skip out on
or
that.
Sunshine, of course.
But no.
Wait,
But going back to like Genesis even. Like
Yeah.
you gotta play the Sonic.
any
You have
Genesis
to play
games.
the Sonic games just to play them at least. Like
Yeah,
just to
no,
know.
no,
I never liked the Sonic games. I couldn't get that first level. I was like,
Yes.
God, this is just terrible.
No, it's not.
I didn't like them.
It
I'm
really
sorry.
is. It really
you
is.
guys are crazy.
They were just bad.
They were not.
They were just a
bad.
different type of gameplay that I wasn't used to and never liked. I'm not saying they were
it's-
bad. They were beautiful games. They were stunning, but I was like, I don't understand this type of gameplay. It does not vibe with me. I feel like I have zero control over this character because you don't.
Because you don't have any control.
No, you totally do. The 1, 2, and 3. You kidding me?
It's all about speed, man. Look how fast Sonic is, man. He's so
Yeah,
that's
fast.
like
never,
the
you know
first-
what? He's never stopping to figure out if he's making
First
the right
zone in
turns.
each game, and besides that, doesn't have anything to do with that.
Genesis games. So I think that the only Genesis games that I would recommend that I think people really need to play because I think they're seminal and chronically underrated, and I can't believe that this series doesn't exist anymore in the same way as Phantasy Star. Like Phantasy Star 1 is a Master System game, but 2, 3, and 4 are Genesis games, and they're sci-fi role-playing games. That wasn't that common, especially on console. We weren't seeing them.
Star, I don't even remember
We
that
weren't
game.
even seeing them. Yeah,
It was like
PHA.
Final Fantasy, but
Those games are great.
Sega version.
And so I think that people deserve, if you're a role playing game fan, those are games that were so very different, I think, from most of what was coming. I mean, we had like Robo Trek and Earthbound and whatever the fuck was going on SNES at the time in terms of more sci-fi or modern day role playing games, but it was much more common. It still is much more common to play a fantasy game in that genre. And so I think, yeah, those games, especially if people really love Phantasy Star 4 as well. I think it's very expensive to find it.
What about like was it Golden Axe?
Oh, Golden Axe and yeah.
Was there Altered Beast?
Oh, Jesus. Don't play Altered Beast. So Altered Beast
Which one was Altered Beast? I get those two confused. Golden Axe is the one where you...
great.
One is the one where you pick your 3 guys. It's the 2.5D, right? You're like one. You always have to do with the big axe. Then someone else got stuck.
That's
playing
Golden Axe.
The dwarf. Is that Golden Axe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that game was dope.
No, the Golden Axes are fun games. Don't play Altered Beast. But
Altered
again,
Beast.
Altered
Which
Beast,
one's
Altered
Altered
Beast
Beast?
might be the worst game I've ever played in my life.
really?
Yeah, the game sucks.
I mean, it does suck.
That
but
game sucks. And what's so funny about it? Well, so again, we were talking about Altered Beast would be a fun game to play if you want to know how bad a game can get because Altered Beast is fucking atrocious.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Atrocious.
Get you some Altered Beast.
No.
I remember this game.
No.
It's so it just doesn't get much worse than that.
You're a guy that you like turn into a werewolf, right? Or
Yeah,
something
but
like
it's
that.
so slow. The sprites are huge. It's like this most plotting. The game sucks. The game sucks. I hate that game so much. When it came out on PS3, I'm like, I gotta play this again. I downloaded it, and I was like,
Oh man.
oh my god, this game's awful.
So okay, is there any more Genesis?
No, I mean, I'm not going to I'm not too evangelical about
Yeah,
Genesis.
I'm not too familiar with the Genesis library, especially
like
from a
Greg's not
quality
here.
standpoint. It's more, I love the Sonic games. Then so N64, Star Fox 64 is the one that I was.
What
thinking
about Smash?
See, Smash, I would wait for the GameCube.
Yeah.
Like if you're only gonna play one of them, like to get really into it, I think Melee is the right one to start with. I mean, 64 is cool to look at and be like, oh, this is where it came from. But I think Melee really is like
That's when they actually
the real
got it.
birth of the franchise. But PlayStation, I mean, that's the one that I think that there's a lot of games that are required reading. There's the Final Fantasy VII, Metal Gear Solid, and Castlevania.
Castlevania Symphony of the Night, the Resident Evil games.
Yeah, Resident Evil.
what about
1,
fighting games?
2. Oh, fighting games. Yeah, Street Fighter 2
Street Fighter
on
2.
Super Nintendo.
Right. Oh yeah, you
And,
gotta have it on SNES.
Mortal
That's-
Kombat 2, I think, is also required just to play, like just to know.
I mean,
you know?
that game was totally cultural at that point too. So it's a cool game to go back to and put
about-
yourself in that time.
What console was Virtual Fighter on? Was that
that
PS1?
was Saturn.
Saturn.
and
That was Saturn.
Dreamcast. Oh, Soul Calibur on Dreamcast.
Soul Calibur. That's what I'm
Dreamcast.
thinking of.
Soul
And then
Calibur
Tekken.
1.
When did Tekken come in?
Tekken was PlayStation. I'm not sure how required
Tekken was
Tekken
legit,
is,
though,
but
man.
Tekken,
Just to
it's
see where that came
like
from.
3D arenas and all
Yeah.
that shit. Like it wasn't the first to do it, but it was definitely one of the bigger ones.
Yeah.
The Crash Bandicoot series, it's important.
You love it. You love you some
I
Crash
do.
Bandicoot.
And like really seeing, like knowing that in the 90s platformers were where it's at, you know, and playing those, seeing how things have changed. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 on PlayStation. I think that's very important for the history of games and how things changed then. It became way more licensed, focused, and all that stuff.
And I'm assuming we're not going to bring in PC gaming into any of this.
Well, I mean,
You can Steam.
Yeah, what
Steam is a
Yeah,
smorgasbord.
you gotta go. I mean,
of
there's that's
classic games.
too much. It's-
Well, I was going to say we probably should end it there just because we've already given him thousands of dollars worth of recommendations.
Yeah.
So he's already going to have to pick and choose.
I mean, go back if you haven't played. Go back and play the Half-Life. All the Half-Life games are amazing.
But if he wants to reach out to me or anyone wants to reach out and just you can just ask what genre, what console. I mean, because we can get much more specific about these things. It's just these are kind of the overarching kind of game. I mean, everyone should
XCOM.
play Mario or something like that. Yeah,
and
XCOM.
PS2, just to go up there because I gave Smash on GameCube. Xbox, play Halo 1 for sure, and PS2, GTA 3, and Vice
Yeah.
City even. You know, San Andreas. I don't know if it is as important.
I never played San Andreas. I played for like 5
I
seconds.
mean, it's awesome, but it's like I think Vice City held that
Up
real
until
special.
What was the last one that just came out?
5.
5. Up until 5, my idea of Grand Theft Auto was I jump in one of my buddy's save games and whatever car he has and just fucking destroy the town and then get arrested and then he gets pissed off at me. That's all I ever did.
I mean, hey, that's an option.
Yeah.